The Bahrain Grand Prix exposed brutal weaknesses in some teams and drivers while rewarding impressive improvements from others, so here's everything we learned from the fourth round of F1 2025. Lando Norris still leads the World Championship, but the best McLaren driver so far this season has been Oscar Piastri. Norris was the inverse of his teammate in Bahrain, slower, more ragged and less assured than ever. A podium from 6th on the grid to retain the points lead is alright on a weekend when Norris really struggled in the car and out of it as well. McLaren team boss Andrea Stella believes Norris is just in a difficult phase that stems from not quite hooking things up naturally at the moment, and backs Norris to come through that by tidying up his own driving and getting a little bit of help from McLaren. But Norris needed too much help in Bahrain, and he admitted that the quality of the car is bailing him out a lot. Piastri, by contrast, now has 2 wins to Norris's 1, and the evidence is overwhelming that he's upped his game from last year and taken a decisive step forwards as a driver in both qualifying and in races. Yes, the car is very good, and it may even suit Piastri and his style a little better, but he's performing at a very high level and is not just a championship threat, he's usurping Norris as the favourite. Red Bull's shambolic race brought the team crashing down to earth just 1 week on from Max Verstappen's win in Japan. Some of its issues are one-offs, like the pit stop gantry failure that hurt both Verstappen and Yuki Tsunoda. But some of what Red Bull suffered is not so easy to fix, especially when it comes to getting on top of its difficult 2025 challenger. While the RB21 has flashes of speed, it's struggling with its through-corner balance, and that means on tracks where tyre temperatures need to be carefully managed, it falls out of its narrow operating window, and when it does that, the Red Bull's performance drops off a cliff. The issue appears to be mainly aerodynamic and relates to the shift of balance from front to rear as the car changes direction and speed, but the team's wind tunnel is not offering the correlation and consistency it wants for working on such a detailed area, so its best short-term hope is that different track layouts and tyres better suit its package in the near future. Ferrari has long since come to terms with the fact this season has fallen short of expectations so far, but having done that, the team had reason to be quietly positive about the Bahrain weekend, despite Charles Leclerc and Lewis Hamilton finishing 4th and 5th. The introduction of a floor upgrade combined with setup progress made Leclerc at least feel that he's now able to extract the potential from the car in qualifying, it's just that it's not fast enough. And while Hamilton cut a dejected figure after a poor qualifying performance, lapping 6 tenths off Leclerc and clearly struggling for confidence in the faster corners, he was much happier after recovering to 5th in the Grand Prix. That's particularly in terms of continuing to adapt to the demands of the Ferrari and understanding how Leclerc, who was talked of conducting extreme setup experiments, is getting more out of it. Ferrari still has a long way to go before it has the speed to challenge for regular wins on merit, but at least there are hints of progress. George Russell's metronomic start to the season hit a new peak in Bahrain with a result that was even harder to secure than it looked. It was no secret during the race that things were going a little awry for the Mercedes driver, with messages about a potential dash display shutdown and accidental DRS misuse as a result of an unusual electronics problem. These were frustrating inconveniences, especially as Russell had a faster McLaren and probably a faster Ferrari chasing him, even if they didn't tangibly threaten his result. But a brake-by-wire failure that occurred and resulted in shifting brake pressure did. Russell called it exceptionally difficult towards the end and had to do various settings resets while adjusting his own driving. He described himself as pretty pleased to see the race was over. Team boss Toto Wolff said to manage that as effectively as Russell did was amazing, and it was another sign of his evolution into one of F1's very best drivers. Alpine looked like a midfield leader in pre-season testing, and we ranked it as 6th best and vying with Williams for best of the rest. That appeared to have been generous, even though its pointless first 3 races of the season didn't feel fully representative. In Australia, Pierre Gasly would have scored without the late race return of the rain, but in China and in particular Japan, the power unit deficit was telling. And the Bahrain race weekend showed Alpine's potential was indeed no mirage, as Gasly finished 7th after setting the 5th fastest time in qualifying and only lost 6th place to Verstappen on the final lap of the race. Gasly said afterwards that the team needs to understand why it was so quick, but the car proved rapid in the faster corners and was decent on traction off the slower ones. And while the cooler conditions of Sunday night, compared to qualifying, meant a potential tyre degradation weakness wasn't exposed, the performance shows Alpine really is a midfield threat. Even rookie Jack Doohan spent a significant proportion of the race in the points before sliding back while struggling on the hards in the final stint, and should now have until around the middle of the season to secure his seat longer term. Yuki Tsunoda ticked off 2 objectives on his second outing for Red Bull Racing, reaching Q3 and then finishing 9th to bag a couple of points. But it was in many ways a more difficult weekend for him than his Suzuka debut was, and he admits he has a long way to go before he fully understands the capricious Red Bull RB21. While Tsunoda remains confident behind the wheel, it's all about understanding how to keep the car in the narrow operating window it demands, especially compared to the Racing Bulls car that he started the season in. Significant work is being put in to adapt into the very different way Red Bull works on tyre preparation in qualifying, relying more on the driver's input than the more prescriptive approach of Racing Bulls. Tsunoda is also working on understanding how to anticipate the balance shifts of the car. He struggled with the same problems as Verstappen in Bahrain, but while he was slower, unlike predecessor Liam Lawson, Tsunoda is working with it. And as Tsunoda puts it, he doesn't even understand half of the car yet, so there is still plenty of potential for improvement. 4 drivers are yet to score points this season. 3 are full season rookies, and then there's Fernando Alonso. The 2-time world champion is famed for his ability to wrestle a good result from the most stubborn of cars, but even he's struggling to do much with this Aston Martin. While teammate Lance Stroll took advantage of circumstances to score points in Australia and China, it's hard to see Aston Martin doing that on pure performance at the moment. The car's tailwind weakness was badly exposed in Japan, and in Bahrain its low-speed troubles were a killer, but it's also just not quite as good as other midfield teams anywhere. As Alonso pointed out, there is always someone a little bit ahead of them. Maybe some Alonso magic will offer an immediate reprieve in Saudi Arabia, but as he put it, scoring points seems difficult this year. The FIA has made progress in improving its race control systems to make its monitoring of things more efficient and robust off the back of investment in technology, staff and even some artificial intelligence. But nothing is infallible, as was highlighted by a couple of unusual Bahrain flashpoints. First, a small indiscretion from Nico Hülkenberg slipped through the net in qualifying. The FIA systems had missed him exceeding track limits at turn 11, and by the time it was ruled that his time should have been deleted, the Sauber driver had already been through to Q2, when in reality it should have been Alex Albon there instead. Then in the race, systems that should have detected Carlos Sainz serving a 10-second penalty for pushing Kimi Antonelli off track didn't. So when Sainz retired, the stewards initially handed him a grid penalty for the next race in Saudi Arabia. This was quickly corrected and the sanction was rescinded. The FIA put its hand up and admitted that on both aspects it got things wrong, and that means a tweak to processes going forward to ensure there is no repeat. The decent battles in Bahrain served as a good antidote to the mini-crisis of Japan, where cars were unable to race each other. Some decent strategy variation, fun overtakes and plenty of intrigue showed that when there is an element of tyre degradation and the track is a better fit for modern cars, F1 can still deliver a decent show. With Pirelli eager to ensure that tyres are more of a challenge in the next races, with softer compounds having been selected, the hope is that the F1 spectacle is much more like it was in Bahrain than how things played out in Japan without going too far. While zero degradation tyres are great fun for drivers because they can push harder and more to the limit, they don't deliver good racing action or open the door for many overtakes, especially when things are so close throughout the field. From trackside, the contrast in the Sauber between pre-season testing and the race weekend in Bahrain was clear. It looked like the most improved car. The trouble is, that simply upgraded it from terrible to still being bad. So while the team believes progress has been made, Gabriel Bortoleto scoffed at our suggestion that it looked like the car was better, and you can't blame him. While the Sauber is brisk enough to reach Q2, in the races the car is tricky. The drivers have both complained about how bad the car is in dirty air, making first laps a nightmare. That points to a car that's not especially stable aerodynamically at the best of times and is therefore more prone to suffering in turbulence. That's a concern and isn't a characteristic that can necessarily be dialed out just by adding downforce.